بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. So if I could get everyone to, if you can, turn on your video cameras, and there should be about 5 or 6 other people coming in. So tonight we are going to be speaking to Sister Maryam Sarrafee, and I think many of you know her. Some of you are directly related to her, and I was just sharing with her, and I think this is something that I want to share with all of you as well. We're talking about careers, of course, and I've exposed you to about 12 or 13 people so far in various kind of proper careers where they they have a job and they get paid. But one of the things I wanted to highlight, and we're going to do this in the next couple of sessions, inshallah, is a very real option of life to be a stay-at-home mother. And I want us to explore that, see what it's like, and realize that that's actually not like it's nothing less than a career, and may actually be much more than the career. And I think it syncs a lot with what Sayyid Sulayman told us in the very first session that we had about the ideals for both men and women, that women should try to focus if they do want to do a career, then it should be the kind of career that allows them to be family centered and home centered and those kinds of things. So yeah, with that in mind, we're gonna talk to Sister Maryam. So usually we ask, something like kind of how you got to this point, but maybe I don't know if you have something in mind. Otherwise, like one thing I wanted to get you to talk about is kind of like what is your life like? What is your day like? In a way that like kind of shows what you do with your time, what are the things that you accomplish in the day? What brings meaning to your life?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My day right now, because I'm also homeschooling, so it kind of looks like a work day to a certain extent, where from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. we're in the schoolroom, and the kids are studying. I'm working with kids one-on-one. We have a class in the afternoon, and then by 4 p.m. I'm done for the day. That's when I go up and I, think about all the house chores, dinner, things like that I have to worry about. So I
And
do
if you're
kind of
just teaching your own children, or do you have a cooperation with other families?
I right now it's my own children, my nieces, my nephews, and another family who comes as well. And so we have about 6 kids on a daily basis, and then once a week I do a writing class, and so we have about 7 additional kids for that middle school class. So there's a lot of activity and hustle bustle going on inside the house.
Right. But so when you're doing the schooling, is it kind of you're focused on that, or are you juggling other things as well and having to go back and forth doing other kind of chores or activities?
So we in the middle of it, what's nice about being at home is that, our lunch is at home, so all the kids are involved in preparing the lunch and cleaning the kitchen, and so everyone sort of has a role in making the house run. So it's much more manageable, and basically from 8:30 to 10:30 I work nonstop, and then I'll go up and I'll make breakfast, and then I'll have breakfast if my husband's home or with my mother-in-law, and then after that I come down and I continue my one-on-one with the kids until 12:30, and then I have a break. That's lunchtime, and we have a break until 2:15, and then we have an afternoon class, a high school class in the afternoon, and so that's what ends at 4. So I do have 2 breaks in the middle that I can use for household responsibilities, things like that. Yeah.
So the sentiment that I mentioned, I think sometimes it's hard for people to understand how life can be meaningful if you're not working and earning money. I think many people, that seems like if you're not doing paid work, then everything else is kind of
Not valuable.
optional, frivolous, not valuable, kind of
Mhm.
something that you do on the side. You kind of take care of that, but the real thing is what you do and get paid for. Is that do you see that as well in the world around us?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I remember having a conversation when I was in college with a friend, non-Muslim, and so she was saying that if you want to raise a family and be at home and raise your kids, then what's the point of getting an education? Like, why are you doing this? What are you going to do with it? You know, that sentiment is very common and widespread.
What do you say to that? What did you say to her, or what would you say to her now?
Um, well, I don't remember what I said to her then, but now I'd say that it's not, I guess, a choice that you want to make in life. It's not really an individual choice. It's not about what I want to do. It's a choice that you kind of make as a family, and that's based on what your priorities are. And so if your priorities are children and family, because nobody is going to love your children and support your children and take care of them more than you are, or your grandparents or your parents, and there's no question about that. Once you give that responsibility to someone else, then you're entrusting a role to someone else that's just going to be kind of a second rate role that 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 I guess you're not replaceable,
Hmm.
and that's a very valuable thing to recognize. And so once you have your priorities as a family, then you choose the path that you want to go to. I don't know if you wanted to take a break from Maghrib. I don't want to delay it, but
Yeah, let finish your thought and then we'll take a break. Inshallah.
but it's just about the priorities that you have as a family, and that can look differently in different ways. And I was really inspired by a story I had read a long time ago by it was in the life of Allama Tabatabai. I can share it maybe after prayer.
Hmm.
But it's just that if you make your choices for the right reasons, then Allah really takes care of you. And I think that that's really what matters in the end.
Okay. So I apologize to break it up like this, but several of us are in Chicago and our prayer time is going to kick in. So we'll take just 5 minutes. We'll pray our Maghrib and come right back. But I'll pause the recording and okay, let's start up again. You want to share the story from Allama Tabatabai?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I heard it. I think this is when I was in Iran. I had heard this story, and it was very moving for me. It touched me and helped me sort of see things differently. And I think it had to do with, and I might not be remembering the story exactly correctly, so I'll just try to give the gist of it. That he studied Islam from a very young age, and I think his trajectory in life was to be an alim, to be a scholar. And at one point, when he was in Najaf, he was struggling with poverty, and so he ended up leaving his studies and fulfilling a role that he probably didn't want to do. It was something that he had to do just to be able to meet his basic needs. And he ended up moving back to Iran, I think Tabriz, where his hometown was. And he was just farming, and he farmed the land for 10 years of his life, where he didn't study and he didn't, and that's just the trajectory of his life. He wanted to study, he wanted to study and be a scholar, but he went to Iran and he spent 10 years, that's an entire decade of his life, farming. And because that was kind of the role that he had to fulfill and what he had to do. And then after that, he went, I think, to Qom, where he spent the rest of his life. And that's when he wrote the Tafsir al-Mizan and became who he is today. And I think that you know, these decisions that we make, it's not always what we want to do. It's just kind of what the situation asks for and what your priorities are. And so it's not, I don't really know how else to explain it. It's not like an individual choice. This is what I want to do with my life, and I'm going to do it no matter what anyone says, because it's my passion. Sometimes, you know, your passion is there, but Allah tests you or puts you in certain situations where you have to make choices that you don't want to make, but in the long run, you're making the right choice, and Allah takes care of you.
So I would imagine you were in college before marriage, if I understand your kind of timeline right. And so you were going through education maybe with whatever notions you might have had before, and then maybe at some point you get married, and then and you know, maybe that's is that when you made these
Yeah, I kind of
decisions,
went
or
like this, and then I went like that.
but
When I was in
did you
college,
think about these things about like being family centered in those earlier stages,
not at
or no,
all.
it
No,
came later? So
no,
how did that transition happen?
it wasn't even something on my radar. Just
Yeah.
I grew up in that environment where, you know, education is important. You have to study and get a degree, and that was basically the of utmost importance. And so I went into school. I went into college, majoring in international affairs, and then my plan was to go to law school and be a lawyer and be out there and make a difference and, you know, change the world, all that stuff. And I got married 1 year before I graduated, so I was a junior. And after I got married, we lived apart. He was in Iran, I was in DC, and that year was very difficult for me. And that's when I decided that I want to go to Iran and be there and be with him. I don't want to be apart for another whole 3 years of law school and kind of go into that trajectory. I realized at that point that that's not the life I want to live, to be kind of apart with that goal in mind. And so it changed right then.
So I think the environment around us, people would think that that's kind of like it's kind of like an intellectual dead end or a career dead end, that you get married and then now you stop your education, you stop that trajectory, and now you're like kind of you're limited. How how do you
Um,
think of like a response to that, or how do you think of that kind of mentality?
like it's kind of like an excuse to not do anything. If you don't
The
want to go to
marriages?
school. No, yeah, if you don't want to, like if you don't want to study or if you don't want
No, I think,
to
I mean,
then-
I imagine like the voices around us will tell us that, you know, men and women should be this, like we should both go for education, both like follow your passions, both get into a career, and whatever, you know, kind of follow that trajectory as an individual. But then typically in kind of in Muslim culture and Muslim, you know, families, um, once, you know, if you get married, if a girl gets married early, like in college or before college or something like that, then it usually tends that the boy continues down that trajectory of getting a career, but many times the girl will stop her studies, or she'll at least stop professional school, and now she becomes suddenly family centric. Um, so I mean, I think society around us tells us that that's kind of like it's a dead end for the girl then. Marriage
it's
means
like
you
mind
end your dream.
numbing.
You
Yeah, you end
no
your
longer
dream.
do what you wanted to do. Now you have to just be a wife, or just be a mother, or just be a this or that. So it's kind of a limitation. How
Yeah. I
how
think
should we
that
understand?
I see it in terms of priorities. So if your priority is family and you recognize that nobody can raise your children like you can or love your children like you can, then there's there's value in that, in a family setting, and creating a community of and it's not, you know, I would even go as far as to say that it's not something that just a mom can do. It you know, you can't be a grandmother to your child, you can't be a grandfather to your child, you can't be an auntie from the masjid to your child. And so all of these relationships, you know, are very wholesome and build a child. And you learn a lot too. Like I think I learned more about education in raising my own kids, including math and writing and grammar. I think I really learned it when I was working with them on it, more so than when I was studying it myself. And even when I was studying to teach it in college, it was very different experiencing it myself with them. And I grew a lot from it and I learned a lot from it. And it goes by very quickly. It's just, really like 14 years where it's very hands-on, not even. Um, but the decision, and I guess this is something for the men that to keep in mind, that one thing that if women are staying at home and they're not earning an income, then it's a single income family. So the lifestyle is going to have to reflect that too. You're not going to eat out as much as some other families, or you're not going to, your lifestyle is going to reflect that income. And it's just something that you have to decide together as a family. And it's not even either or, because sometimes when you're in a situation where both families do have to work, and and it might be for a certain amount of time, and then you want to be able to have a choice not to do it in the future, or to start maybe once the kids are older. Those options are there. It's not like a black and white situation. It's not like you shouldn't work or you should work. I think it's a choice that you have to make as a family, keeping in mind what your priorities are. Like, how can we best keep our priorities in line, and can we balance it? And if we can balance both of them, then that's great.
Yeah, one thing I've thought a lot about is that our youth tend to just kind of go through life, the educational part of their life, following the paradigms that are there, that are given to them or that are around them. And so typically boys and girls will go through school in parallel. College is an expectation for many of us, that your college is kind of an automatic next step after high school. And then, at some point you decide on a career and you keep following that. So that trajectory is kind of there and you're on autopilot going for that. And then at some point marriage happens. And once marriage happens, then all of a sudden there's kind of like a mix up and a crisis, or it could be a crisis, or it could just be like a sudden challenge. And now, for the first time, both the boy and the girl are thinking about, okay, like now what do I do? What's my relationship like here? And now, like, how do we get income? How do we organize the family? What are our priorities? All of a sudden, it's a sudden thought. When actually, like, I want all of you all at this stage, you should also already be thinking about marriage as, like, that's, if anything's going to be like a given in your life, and like a natural, like, necessary part of your life, it's going to be your married life with your spouse, your children. Like, that family life is going to be, that's where you're headed. Whether you succeed in a career, or whatever you think you're going to be, whether you become that or not, or whether you finish college or don't, like, all those other things are variables. But, like, inshallah, marriage and family and those kinds of things should be, like, um, focuses of where your life is heading. And so you need to think about that and plan for that. And don't just assume that you're going to follow this trajectory that everyone else is following, who doesn't have the same priorities of Islam or family or community, or all these other priorities that we have. But think about those values. So if you're a girl, I realize that Islam doesn't put a burden of earning on you, and so you're not required. You have an Islamic duty. You don't have a duty before God to support your family with an income, which, like, I think people around us would say, oh, that's limitation. That means you're, like, women shouldn't be educated. No, but that's not the natural conclusion of that. You can be educated, but you're not limited in your education the way boys are. Like, boys are going to have to earn and support their family. And so their choices are more limited. They need to figure out how can they, get to a job that's going to support a family and keep it dignified and healthy and all of that. So that means that they can't do, like, something that they really like to do, or that might be really beneficial, but doesn't earn very, very well. They can't do that. Whereas a woman, a girl can choose that. She can say that, like, here's something that our society needs. Here's something that there's a really big, void in the world around me, and I can fulfill that. Even if I never earn anything through that, but I can do something good either for my family, for my community, for, you know, whatever the need is, even if it doesn't earn much or doesn't earn at all. And, you know, it's like I think it opens up possibilities if you think of it like that. Then now there's no
Yeah.
limit.
And, you know, those roles that we feel or society might make us feel are limiting are actually acts of worship, and can, you know, sometimes, you know, you might be very fulfilled in that role, and sometimes it feels like a test. And, you know, it's regardless, you know, it is an act of worship, mothering and taking care of your family and managing it. And, you know, and different families have different dynamics. Some families have a larger extended family dynamic where grandparents are there to be with the children, and the mother can study during that time. And, you know, and it's not a cookie cutter situation. It's really more about what your priorities are and how you want to fulfill them. You know, if this is your passion and this is your priority, how can you balance both of them? And priority is more important than passion. And like Allama Tabatabai, you know, he spent 10 years of his life um, just doing what he needed to do before kind of, I guess, fulfilling his passion.
If you all have questions, then jump in. You can raise your hands or just jump in and unmute your microphone. This question of fulfillment. So how, to some people, taking care of a household seems like drudgery, right? Like that's the characterization of it, is that's kind of like, it's menial work. It's, you know, mindless, or, you know, those kinds of things. Like it's not enjoyable. How do you see that, and like how would you respond to that?
I feel like it's a very Western mindset that I want to, what is it called? I want to love to work. What was it? I don't know what the saying is. Like, I want to love my job and be, you know, work just to do my passion
Right.
and love going to work every day. That's not a reality for anyone. You know, everyone, once you have a job and it's work, it's not always going to be enjoyable. The point isn't to be happy. The point is to be doing what you have to do and fulfilling your obligation, fulfilling your job. Just like men have to go to work and sometimes they don't feel like it, they still have to do it. That's how it is with everyone. You know, I don't really, I guess that doesn't really resonate with me with, you know, the drudgery of it, because everything has drudgery,
Yeah.
not just housekeeping. And the benefit of you know, being at home with the kids is that once they're old enough to do house chores and they're at home, then you can use the kids to help out.
Yeah,
You have
that's
some
part of the
extra hands.
training.
Yeah, you have extra hands in the house, and they learn how to, you know, clean up the kitchen once everyone's done eating. And there's a process of that, you know, then everyone benefits from that.
How would it be, like, what if everyone had this mindset? If everyone, if all women, for instance, become stay-at-home mothers, then I don't know, would that be sustainable? You'd end up with, you know, half the population not working, for instance, or, you know, who would do those professional jobs that maybe women do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some jobs that, like, if there are, you know, certain doctors specifically for women, or that, you know, people that women can go to for their own needs. And I think that there is a place for women in society. It's just, it really depends on how you can meet your priority, you know, how you can balance your priorities. I don't think it's, like I said, it's not a one size fit all. Sometimes there's joint family systems where one will study and work and the other one will be home with the kids, and then they balance out in other ways. There's different ways of making a variety of situations work. Um, just the importance is having your priorities and your values and your orientation in the right place.
Asya?
Yeah, sorry, the question slipped my mind. I'll raise my hand if I remember it.
Oh, okay. Muhammad?
So I wanted to say, so most of the stay-at-home mothers that I know also happen to be like homeschoolers, or they homeschool their children. So what I'm wondering is how feasible or how different is a stay-at-home mother whose parent or whose children are going to public school is than whose children are at home the entire day, and how different is that dynamic?
It's a good question. The If the children go to school, then the mom has that entire half a day open to do whatever they want to fill their time with. And you know, I know people who started to look for part-time jobs, substitute teaching because the timing works with schools, to fill up that time. And then they have their kids in the afternoon that they spend, you know, they spend time with the kids with after school activities and things like that. Um, I let me I don't know. I mean, I'm most of the women currently that I work with on a regular basis are also homeschoolers, and we work together. And that's basically like a full-time unpaid job in terms of actual income. But the value of it is priceless. And
Yeah.
alhamdulillah that I have the opportunity to be able to do it, because it's not something that everybody can do. um, Financially being able to, you know, live off of one income, or, you know, sometimes the situation doesn't present itself at that time. It might come later. So it just looks differently. But alhamdulillah, I really do feel blessed that I'm able to do this and, you know, be with the kids all day.
So some women, they, like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of valuable functions, not only in the family but in society, are the things that are unpaid. So I mean, if you think of like Western society typically pays teachers very low salaries, even though like education is such, like it's, we say it's such a high priority for our society, but then we pay people who are responsible for that very little.
Yeah.
Um, and then even in our communities, like there's, I don't know, if you all are parts of a part of Islamic centers, and you know how um, maybe to some extent how they work. They work largely on volunteer basis, where people are putting in their time and they're building it or volunteering, and all the little cogs in the wheel to make your masjid or your Islamic center work are people, and that's not paid work. Um, uh, but it only happens if there are people who can donate their time, devote their time, and who also have skills and have like a passion and have, you know, all those things to contribute. Um, so in our, like, one of the blessings of kind of typical Muslim society is that we have women, usually you know, women who are stay-at-home mothers, who have education, skills, and all of those things, and also are not tied down by a regular scheduled paid work. So they can devote their time to building community, taking care of people who need to be taken care of. You know, like, women are very, like, they tend to be very social, and they're very kind of a cooperative, where, like, you know, somebody, you know, somebody's in need, or somebody's sick, or somebody's had a baby, or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden, you know, women figure out a system to help that person. They wouldn't be able to do that if everyone is, you know, gone from, you know, 9 to 5 or more, and you know, they're bound to their job. Then what would happen in all those situations? We wouldn't have that community support and all of those things that we value so much, that make our lives actually very rich and fulfilling.
Yeah, I mean, I did experience that personally, and I can't speak on behalf of everybody or women in general, but personally, when I was doing my student teaching, I had to teach full time at a third and fourth grade elementary school. And I would have to get there before 7 in the morning. And by the time I got home, it was probably 5, 6, and then I still had grading to do. And even though it was just for one semester, I I knew that I wouldn't be able to teach at a public school. It was very draining because I would get very personally invested in all the children, And by the time I get home, I'm just completely drained and I didn't have anything to give anymore. And so that, for me, I wanted to put all that energy and invest all that energy in our, the kids in our own community, our children, and do it in a way that, and doing it that way was a lot easier for me because it wasn't a full-time job. It wasn't 5 days a week, and I, from 7 a.m. to 7, it's like 12 hours a day of my life every day, and that didn't include my children. It didn't include my family. So I just felt like it was asking a lot of me, and I wasn't able to fulfill my own obligations. And so I knew that wasn't the life for me. So I never actually taught in public school after I got my teaching degree. I just taught Sunday school and homeschooled.
Asya?
Yeah, I had a question about kind of marriage and like marrying young and how to sort of, I don't know, brace yourself, like be able to make that choice without feeling afraid of what other people will think. Because I feel like there's a stigma against young, as though that's like a bad choice that will lead to poor life outcomes. And I don't know. Do you have any kind of tips or just ways to ground yourself?
I can tell you that, like, I come from a family of 3 girls. We're 3 girls, and we all got married young, like progressively older. Like my older sister was 17, I was 19, and my younger sister was 21. So we progressively got older, but it was relatively young. It was basically before career age. It was before undergrad or less. And I think it worked out great for all 3 of us.
But did you face the stigma? Do you remember that kind of stigma from college?
I didn't sense it. I didn't face it. There are some people, and actually not in America, but in family, like in Iran, I probably faced more stigma from Iran than I did in America. That but I think that's just a specific subset of a culture that I was in. But I think that I didn't really face any stigma. I didn't have to answer to anyone, and maybe people said something. I don't know. I wasn't aware of it. But I did finish off a year after I got married, and that was difficult to be apart. And I did my master's when we had moved to Chicago. So my kids were younger at that time. And I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own. Like my husband was very supportive. And my classes were in the evenings. So we had to make our schedule work and in a way that, someone could be with the kids. And it was just a 2-year program, and with the student teaching, so 2.5 years. But aside from that, I think that was the only time I felt like I had to sort of make a sacrifice for a little bit. But
do you remember how the finances worked? You don't have to speak kind of personally, but like if kids are college age and they're getting married, then how do you work out the finances? Do parents continue to support their kids, or now the husband is responsible for the wife's tuition?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question, because it depends a lot on the family situation too. I mean, families should be prepared to, help get a newlywed started up. I mean, it has been more difficult for families who had to rely on just themselves, like a newlywed had to rely just on themselves financially. And that's usually a situation where both would have to work to some extent, because if the husband is still in school or just out of school, or in the process of getting a job or studying, whatever it may be, that family support is really important, whether you're living with parents or not eating out at all, things like that. It definitely does affect your lifestyle in the beginning. So I guess you'd have to, it would depend on the husband's income. And if he's also just getting started, then the family's support is really important. And if it's not there, then it can be a struggle sometimes in the beginning. And sometimes that is a test.
Asia?
So to kind of bounce off Asia's question earlier, it's a little bit similar. I was wondering, you mentioned that when you were younger, you weren't thinking about, like, it hadn't even crossed your mind to be like a stay-at-home mother before you did it, basically. But for someone who was like my age, let's say 17, 18, and they were like, somebody was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, a stay-at-home mom. And they'd probably get a lot of, I don't know, negative feedback if they were to say that. Do you have any, I guess, advice as to how to combat that?
I guess it would just be internal advice that when you make that decision, well, it's an aspiration before you're married, and when you're married, remember, it's not an individual decision. It's not just about what I want. It's about how is it that we can, as a couple, as a family, fulfill our role, be true to our values, and keep our priorities in front of us in check. How can we be able to do what we want to do with all of that in place? And it's something that you decide together. And if that is what you choose, and your aspiration is to be stay-at-home mom, be with the kids, you just have to recognize internally that there is inherent value in that, and nobody can love your kids more than you. And anything that you're paying someone to do, it's a job for them. They're gonna probably take care of them in a daycare and get all of that stuff done. But there are it's the best place for them is in the home. And a lot of good schools, they try to recreate a home environment for the kids because that's what the ideal situation is. And so if that is an ideal situation, then it takes a stay-at-home mom to create that ideal situation. So it's kind of like a cognitive dissonance, if that's the right word, where that's best for the kid, but at the same time, you want to do what you want to go out there and have a job. And so you kind of have to turn a blind eye and be like, I have to go for the second best option. But what's wrong with the first best? What's wrong with that ideal situation at home that you can create? So it's just something that you have to inherently find value in and know that it is an act of worship, and it is an ideal situation for the kids, and it's something to be grateful for that opportunity.
I think in a way you have to have an attitude. Like we're different in so many ways from the popular culture and all the trends that are around us because we're Muslim, and we're kind of used to going against the grain, at least with society at large. Since we're doing it for good reason, we're doing it, to try to be in line with what Allah wants from us. We should take pride in that. Yeah, I don't socialize the same way my peers at school socialize. I don't, have relationships the same way other people have relationships. I don't do so many things the way they do it. I do things the way Muslims do it, based on Islamic values. If you take pride in that, you have an attitude, kind of a confidence in what you're doing, then that goes a long way. you're not apologizing that I'm going to be a stay-at-home mother. I'm just going to be a housewife. I'm just going to be a stay-at-home mother. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to take care of my kids. If that's your attitude, then you're already, like, even in the words of it, you're downplaying. You're saying, this is all I'm going to do. I could have done so much more, but this is all I'm going to do. It's like, it shows that your perspective on the value of this is very low. But if you take pride in it and you realize this is actually, as Sister Maryam was saying, that this is actually what you really want to do or what really needs to happen in your family, then it should be the other way around. I don't have the luxury of being a stay-at-home mother, so I'm just going to go and become a doctor or something because I can't. Like, that should be, like a lesser choice than this.
Write down what your values are. What are the most important things for you? What do you feel are your priorities as a Muslim? And just write them down and see, keep that with you so you know that this is how I want to orient my life. And then whatever situation Allah puts you in, try to, be flexible and work with it, because that's really important to be able to compromise and sacrifice. Really important. You don't want to just be dogmatic that, no, this is what I want to do. But as long as it's a choice that you make as a family, and it keeps your values in line and your priorities in check.
Can you think of like a list of skills that, maybe two lists, skills that you were able to develop over time that have become have been very valuable for you in whatever you do, and maybe another list of skills you wish you had or you wish you had developed earlier, either through school and education or through other kinds of activities or whatever it might be. But like, what are those skills that would serve you really well in your role as a manager of a household and raiser of children and wife or husband and all these different things that you do?
A lot of skills I'd like to have. I'd have to really think about this. What I felt like I've gained over the years is just the child, like the nature of children, how they are, what they need, conflict resolution in that regard, and just watching children grow together with other children, community, the importance of community, the importance of having other people in your life to be there for your children. And I've seen the value of that, and it's a big blessing to have that.
Those sound like things that you've come to appreciate or you've developed through living these different things.
Through
Are there
having
certain skills, like, either teaching, like going through a teaching certification or a teaching kind of route? You think that was important for being able to homeschool, or no, that was actually for another path that you decided not to take? And
yeah, it was for another path. I don't think that you need to have a teaching degree to be able to homeschool. I think that there are a plethora of curricula out there that that a parent can follow along and learn, like I did, how to do math all over again and grammar and all of this great stuff that I appreciated as an adult. So it was really homeschooling me more than them, I think. But the skills that I learned actually doing it from the resources that were provided for homeschoolers was much more beneficial than the skills that I learned becoming a certified teacher. If anything, a lot of the material I had read before I wanted to pursue a degree in education, I felt was more beneficial in my understanding than the stuff I had to read when I was actually there. So I don't think it's a requirement to homeschool, but not every stay-at-home mom is a homeschooler. And it's not like and I'm not trying to say that's also an ideal situation for everybody. This is just what worked for me, and it's not something that I had decided for the next 18 years I'm going to homeschool my kids. It's something that it was working. It started off with, I think kindergarten is just too long, and and at age 5 it was just too much out of the day that I didn't see them and I was home, and it just worked to just, start doing things at home. And year by year, it just kept working. And we just kind of went along with it up until the end. And so it's, you just kind of work with the situation that you're in, and just, I mean, you're faced with a lot of decisions at different times, and just try to make the decisions for the right reasons. So it's not, you can't judge other people's decisions. I think I'm trying to get to that as well, that, you can't judge other people for the decisions that they make, because you don't know what their situation is. I feel blessed that I've been able to do what I do, because my passion has aligned with what I want to do with the kids, and the fact that I have my nieces and nephews and have all the kids in the house, and they're working together, they're playing together. It's just like it's an ideal situation for me, and I'm very grateful for it.
It's actually something you said about not needing that education to do what you're doing. That's and learning on the job. That's exactly what we've heard from, I think, just about everyone else we've had on as well. If you remember, like, almost everyone has said that you go through education, you get certified in this and that, but actually, like, 80%, 90% of what you need to know to do whatever job you're going to do, you learn on the job. It's not what you learned in school.
Yeah, but then you need the degree to do it on the job.
What is that?
You need the degree to be able to do it on the job.
Yeah. So I'm that the degree has some role to play, and maybe there's some education that you don't, it's not so tangible, but then there's also certification that gives you the ticket to get into the job. But then once you get into the job, now you have to relearn or learn so much more new stuff.
Yeah. I know people in the medical profession who were YouTubing what they needed to do, like procedures that they needed to do. Yeah.
Any other questions from you all? Yeah, this is great. Do you have any preference, like stay-at-home mother? Is that a term that you find like a good term that describes you?
I don't honestly, I have put zero thought into it.
Yeah.
So I don't really have. I hear people joke. I've heard like domestic engineer.
Those seem patronizing though.
Yeah, it is. It is. Stay-at-home mom, homemaker. Actually, homemaker is nice.
Yeah.
Because making a home is it takes work. And so that's a nice term. I don't know what connotations it has, but that seems like a nice term.
Have you thought about what'll happen after, once the youngest is done with school, then like what do you think life will be like after that? If so much is focused on educating the kids now.
I mean, I'd like to, a lot of our homeschooling has been not just us, it's been other families as well. And I would like to continue working with other families and other kids, even if my kids are grown out of it. It's something that I really enjoy doing. So, if I didn't follow this trajectory in life and I, grew up as a non-Muslim somewhere, I probably would have ended up being a teacher in a public school. And so just trying to align what I enjoy doing with my values as a family, this just became a very easy, and it just felt right. It felt like the right thing to do, and we just, we went forward year by year, just like that. The boys didn't have any questions. In order for your wives to be able to be homemakers, you guys also have to think about what careers you want to go in to support that lifestyle.
I think you said like two sides of that are both important. One is the husband needs to earn enough to be able to support his family if it's going to be a single income family. But then on the other side, the expectations of material life also have to be moderate, because you're living on a single income family, a single income, then you're not going to be able to live you know, extravagantly like somebody, and you don't want to anyway, inshallah. Like that's not a good ideal to have anyway. But like those expectations have to be like moderate in your mind. Otherwise, you know, as a girl, if you're expecting to marry and like, you know, live a very lavish lifestyle, then it's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna work out. And as a husband, if you're expecting that your wife is gonna pull her weight and she's gonna double your income, and you're expecting that kind of lifestyle based on her income, that's not compatible with what we're talking about right now. Like all those expectations, or like just perspectives on what family is like, what life is like, have to be kind of in line with one another. It can't be that you want one thing that's very extreme and is somehow going to go with Islamic values and moderation. Those, they don't jive.
Yeah, it'll have real on the ground effects. I mean, I know people, one family who the wife earns more, but they choose, and this is a decision that they make, to choose to live at the husband's income so that the wife doesn't have to work full time, and she can work when she wants to work, when it works with their schedule, with their kids' schedule. And so it's kind of like a part-time situation here, and that works. And you know, it's something that aligns with their values, and they're able to balance that. What's important is being able to balance that, and it's a decision that, you know, you make as a family.
Your involvement with your like Islamic community, or your like in-laws, or your own parents, do you see like would those things be possible if you had a regular job?
If I was working, it would be very difficult to be able to fulfill the obligations that I had as a daughter, daughter-in-law, wife, mother, sister. Would be very difficult if I was working full-time. Yeah, I don't think I would be able to be there when I needed to be there. Yeah.
Sayyid Sulayman had told us one of his phrases was that you can't have it all, or you can't do everything. Something has to give. So if you're going to devote yourself to these things, then the paid job can't be there. If you're gonna be a professional, then you're gonna have to compromise on your children's care and upbringing, your spouse, your community. All these other things have to take a backseat then. So those are also, you know, values that you have to straighten out in your mind.
And if you want, if you want to look at it with the perspective of being able to fulfill all of your roles, all of your obligations, that's one way of being able to have it all. Not in I guess that material sense, but it is very fulfilling and purposeful. Yeah.
Oh, that's so you're saying you can have it all, but with in a different perspective, in terms of fulfillment and happiness.
I do feel like I'm blessed to be able to have it all. But then again, my expectation doesn't include fancy restaurants and fine dining and, you know, resorts and, you know, like that lifestyle is, it's not something really on my radar. So without that, I do feel like I have it all. It's in the sense that it's fulfilling. I'm able to feel purposeful and to be able to fulfill that purpose. And that's everything that I need.
Very good. So we're out of time. Any last questions, or we'll close? All right, thank you so much, Maryam. This was excellent, and yeah, I'm really glad you were able to come on. I think we're losing your connection. All right. So inshallah, you can pass your thanks to her through text or however else you communicate with her. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you.
Thank you.